Welcome to FREDTalks and Guest. And ladies and gentlemen, our guest today, Dr. Tim Gill. He's the International Overseer of the Church of God, Cleveland, Tennessee. He serves as the presiding bishop over 7 million members of the church in what is now over 180 countries around the world. His past service as General Director of World Missions for the Church of God, Cleveland, Tennessee, took him to more than 100 nations of the world. He's also served as State Administrative Bishop and as a local pastor. He has authored several books of sermons, and he's written, this is what a lot of people may not know, he is a gospel singer and has written over 200 gospel songs. So you see that Dr. Hill is not just a theoretician, he is a practitioner. He is someone with so much experience coming up through the ranks of the church and being so generational with the Church of God, and yet one who really tries to put into practice the things that he believes. I would be mistaken if I didn't point out the number one person that's important to him, and that's Paula, his lovely wife. And he is a father, not only a husband, but a father, and he has grandchildren. He's part of the grandparents club, I like to say. If there's one particular resource that I would like to really push out to our audience today, it's Dr. Hill's book on the speed of favor. If you have never read this book, then I want to encourage you to find this and to get a hold of this book and to get it for yourself. His paradigm, Dr. Hill's lens through which he looks through these days in which we live is extraordinary. The opportunistic viewpoint of which he looks at these last days will both inspire you and challenge you.
Well, thank you, Fred. And again, it's great to be with you. I'm going to tell Paula everything you said about me. She needs to hear it. Appreciate it. Fred, I'll just dive in to the deep end of the pool here and just begin by saying that we have lived in the last few months really in historic times. I know there are things that we could recall from the past that might have some similarities, some resemblance, but really, when you get right down to it, we're dealing with certain nuances and intricacies of COVID-19, especially as it relates to the church, that I don't think we've ever dealt with before in all of church history. And so it indeed, in many ways, has been a crisis. And I think it has been defined that way, and that truly has been what it is and what it has been. I think from my standpoint, there are several things. There's about 5 things I'm going to talk about today, but preceding those 5 tactical kind of things, pragmatic kind of things, I want to just lay a foundation for all of it, and that is this. We work from a foundation of victory. From a minister standpoint, from a leader standpoint, as a child of God, I have to go into this or any crisis knowing that I'm not trying to get victory. I'm not trying to achieve or attain victory. Victory is the foundation that I already work from the Lord Jesus Christ and the promises of His Word. And so what I've tried to do with this or any crisis that I've ever dealt with, as a local pastor, as a state leader, and now in international work, that was especially true in world missions, is always go into it understanding that God is for us. And if God be for us, who and what can be against us? So victory is our foundation. That's good preaching. That preaches on any Sunday and any day of the week. But let's talk about some practical things that I've had to rely on. Let me set the stage for you of how I dived into COVID-19 and dealing with it. I was in Israel. A lot of you might remember, some of you may have even been with me. We were on the first tour that I've ever hosted. I've never done one before, been there, but I've never hosted one. It could not have gone any better. I mean, it was just a sterling, wonderful time in the spirit, 80 people, and for 10 days. We were just having a wonderful time. We were aware, of course, before we left of COVID-19 and how it was beginning to develop in other countries. While we were in Israel, the prime minister made an announcement that he would be shutting down the country. He made that announcement only about 2 days before we left. We, as I understand, we were the last flight out before he shut down the nation because of COVID-19. We got out right before midnight, just in time. Well, I bring all of that up to say this. Even before we left Israel, I sat down with a team of people that were with me there, and I said, I don't know that it's even possible to get ahead of this. Probably the best thing we can do is do our best to stay in step with it. But I said, as much as it's possible, I want a team to work with me on COVID-19 as it relates to communication, as it relates to tactical steps and what we need to do. So we actually made our first press release about COVID-19 from the Church of God standpoint anyway, while we were in Israel, talking about some things we had already done, some things we were going to do. Okay, we fly home and we get right into the heat of the battle. And by the time we get home, President Trump has already had several press conferences, and a lot of people are already making plans to shut down. And so almost immediately upon arriving home, I dismissed our international offices staff and sent them home because safety obviously became our priority. There were a lot of things we didn't know that were related to this. We didn't know how far reaching it would be. So we just called everybody together and said, go home. We'll work from home. And so from about March the 14th until about 2 weeks ago in early May, everybody worked from home. And for all practical purposes, international offices had been shut down. And so along with that, I want to quickly say that we didn't stop working. We went home, but we kept working. And working, there were several things that we had to do to just make it work and to make sure that the church was being informed and the church was functioning and all systems were go. But let me talk to you about some personal things that I had to employ. First of all, I had to go into this employing in tandem agility and humility. Wow. Agility and humility. First of all, let me talk about agility. By that, I mean, I knew that with wisdom, with understanding, I had to act quickly. For the last almost 3 months now, there's not really been an opportunity to sit down and take a long, long time to make decisions. You have to rely on what you've known, you have to rely on experience, and you have to be able to act with agility on your side and call in all of those resources, not to make careless decisions, but to make quick and informed decisions as much as is possible. So there's not been any time to just sit back and hope this goes away or hope somebody comes up with a solution. We've had to act with agility, and I hope our work has shown that. I combine that with humility. And I throw in the word humility, Fred, because I had to understand going into this that this would not be a one-man show. I did not have all the answers. Forget the titles. Doesn't matter if you're general overseer or not. Nobody has all the answers in a situation like this. So humility says, I need help. Humility says, I need a resource base and a resource team. I need experts. I'm not an expert, I don't think, in anything, but I'm sure not an expert in COVID-19. And so immediately I pulled in a team of medical physicians. I pulled in a team of legal counsel. I pulled in a team of economists, people that could speak to the economy. If you've watched this on social media, you know that I've had a lot of different people speaking into this. And humility plays a part in that. I have to be willing to say, I don't have it all. I need help. And that lends to hopefully getting consensus, because in a time like this, you need, as much as you can get it, you need consensus. You need to get everybody on the same page, going in the same direction. That doesn't mean we're all going to agree all the time, but we can agree to disagree and still come together at the end of the day. And to that, I want to say, first of all, to the executive committee, all of them, you named them, Raymond Culpepper, Jim Stevens, David Ramirez, and John Childers. I believe it will go down in history that, especially in this situation, we have worked as one. These men, they have worked in the best interest of the church. And so with agility to act quickly and humility that says, I don't need credit. I sure don't want blame, but I don't need credit. Humility says I've got to draw in a team and be humble enough to say, I need you. I need your help. I need your guidance. So going into it, Fred, that's some of the first things that I had to really adopt is agility and humility. Another thing that I want to mention that I saw very important, and I hope we have modeled this. If we haven't, let us know and we'll try to do better. But that is, we have tried to put out there explicit and transparent communication. My motto from this whole thing has been communicate, communicate, communicate. And I said from the beginning, I may not always say what you want to hear, but I'm going to be honest and I'm going to be transparent. And if I know it, I'm going to get it to the public, our public, Church of God, as quickly as possible, so that as much as possible, we can all be on the same page, having the same information. And if I might say, that seems to have been appreciated. I'm sure there have been times we could have done it better. We could have said it more clearly. I'll grant you that. But I think overall, there has been some appreciation throughout the church that we've at least tried to communicate with every forum, with every venue, with every means possible. As of today, with this Zoom call, in the last, I guess, almost 90 days, I have done about 120 different internet live stream /Zoom /YouTube media calls where my face has been on the screen and I've been talking to people. And I think that's just been critical that we've been able to do that. And so communication has been key. Transparency has been key. And that's especially been true when we had to try to answer this situation about postponing the General Assembly. I'll just sideline here long enough to tell you, I've never in my life faced a more difficult decision. I know that was not my decision by myself. There were a lot of us speaking into that. But I've got to tell you, I watched grown men cry over that one, myself included, because it's hard to tell a family there's not going to be a family reunion. But once the decision was made, then I felt our responsibility was to communicate that and talk about all the nuances that were connected with that. So again, another practical step was explicit and transparent communication. In a time of crisis, people have got to hear from their leader. And out front, you've got to be up front with it. You've got to be taking the lead with communication.
If I could just jump in here and say, just from
Sure.
my perspective, you guys talking about the executive committee, the executive council under your leadership, I believe has done an exemplary job. It's kind of like raising children. We've never done this before. And that's the way a crisis is. You can only do the best you can with the information you've got. But, and what I'm hearing you say is that leading in a crisis, management won't work. Status quo won't work. You've got to make decisions, and time is not in your favor.
Exactly.
You have to make decisions, and you gathered this team around you, a guiding coalition, if you will, and you listened. You tried to have a shared vision, a path forward, but you had to make some calls, and some of those calls were not easy. They were unprecedented. But I guess this is why Ron Heifetz from Harvard said in his book that leadership is not for wimps. That management might be. I mean, you can get by, but when it comes to leadership, which involves change and leading change, you've got a baptism in that over the last few months.
Fred, I forget who it was, but there was a military leader, I'm sure a general, he made a statement similar to this. I'm probably paraphrasing and misquoting in some places, but he said, basically, when the bullets are firing and the grenades are exploding, basically you have a choice to go with the battle plan or go with the terrain. And many times you have to go with the terrain. And there are people that will argue with that. I'm sure the best of both worlds is to blend the two. I do know we have to plan, we have to strategize, and I think there are plans that we make that, regardless of the circumstances, run consistent. But sometimes you just have to run with the terrain that you find yourself traveling on. And in some cases, crisis presents that. You know, one thing that we want to do in communication too, and the thing that I've tried to do with so much communication, is counter misinformation.
Yeah.
My deal about putting out right information, consistent communication, is to counter misinformation that so easily gets out there in a time like this. Because, you know, honestly, Fred, people are scared. People are afraid. We've never passed this way before. And fear is out there. And I understand that. And I don't condemn anybody about that. And I don't condemn anybody that has different opinions right now, because there are so many different ways to look at things. But one thing I know I have to do as general overseer is tell the truth, put the right information out there, and put it out there frequently to counter misinformation.
Yes.
I could cite some examples, but I won't bore everybody with that. But that's one thing that I want to do. And then I made these notes, and I think this is important. Another thing in communicating is we communicate what we know. We even are honest enough to communicate and say what we don't know. And then I think it's important that we say what we're doing to find out what we don't know. And so communication is real important. Let me go to a third point, and I think this might be the most important thus far. In crisis, you got to keep things running. You know, it would have been one thing if we could have said to everybody when we let them go home that day, take a 2.5-month vacation. We'll all get back and we'll find it as we left it. But we knew that wasn't true. We knew that we had to keep things running. World missions people still had to have their support. Business and records still had to do what they do. Local churches still have to produce ministry. And to that, let me stop right here and say, Fred, I've never been more proud of our pastors, people that have never thought about going on internet live stream. They've never thought about preaching in any other way besides a pulpit on Sunday morning. They were forced to. If they wanted to have a ministry when this is over, they were forced to find new ways to do it. So bottom line, we did not have the luxury of putting everything on hold. We just had to find new ways to get at it. Yeah. And you've done that. My Lord, if anybody's modeled that, you have. You didn't stop LeaderLabs. You just did it from your house. And Shirley's cooperated with you in that. You've invaded the house there to make LeaderLabs work. And we've all had to do that. We have to keep things running. A pastor has to keep ministering to his people. You talk about a challenge with social distancing. How do we do that now when they're in hospitals? How do we do that now when we can't even get close to them? The whole idea of laying hands on the sick is taken on a new meaning now. How are we going to do that? And so some churches opened up last week and they found ways to distance people and wear masks and do whatever. But my point is we have to keep things running. I said it earlier, we were out of the office, but we weren't out of work. And so we had to keep things running. A fourth thing that I want to leave with you is the word engage. And that kind of goes with communication. But we have to stay engaged with one another. I want to tell you who's going to lose on this deal. The people that are going to lose when this thing is in the history book are those who refuse to engage. Engage with their community, engage with one another, engage with things that keep going on besides COVID-19. Newsflash. There are other things going on besides COVID-19. I'll give you an example, and it's a tragic example. Paul and I we found a little place we could retreat to for a few days, and I'll speak to that in a moment too. But I've spent my morning on the phone with leaders in African-American churches, African-American state overseers, because in the last the last day, there's been another tragic situation that's inflamed the spirit of racism. And so I only bring that up to say, today I have chosen to be engaged with Black America, with African American leaders, to just say, hey, praying for you, we're with you, we're in this together. I put out several social posts about it, saying some very strong things that may not be appreciated by everybody. But I'm just pointing out that there are other things going on besides COVID-19.
Right.
There are family issues. There are other church issues that were going on before this started and will be going on when this is over. So a leader has to stay engaged on all fronts, not just the current crisis, but everything that's going on. Let me mention one more thing, and then I'll stop for dialogue. And that is, in all of this, we've got to keep the big picture in mind. And by that, I'm saying, what comes next? What does the church look like when COVID-19 is over? People talk about going back to normal. I'm not interested in going back to normal. I want to go back to better, whatever better is, whatever the New Testament book of Acts church should have been, was supposed to be, and we never became. That's what I hope we go to, because the church left the building. We kept preaching. It won't be like it was before. It's going to be different. I just want different to be better than what it was. And so, when I say keep the big picture in mind, I'm saying, are we planning? Do we have a strategy in place at our local churches, in our businesses, in our international offices, world missions, whatever? Is there a strategy for going forward? And if there's not, I promise you, you're waiting too long. You better get online and get you a strategy for moving your business, moving your church forward. Let me give you an example. I walked through the Atlanta airport yesterday, Terminal D. That's the terminal that most Chattanooga flights go into to connect. Fred, it was empty. It was empty. It was a ghost town. 3 weeks ago, I was in DFW. Somebody said, why am I even traveling? Because there's some things I have to do. DFW was empty. The hotel was empty. So I'm just simply saying it's going to be different. It may eventually get relaxed, but it's going to be different. Different doesn't mean it's going to be bad. It's just going to be different. And we have to have a big picture mentality. We can't get tunnel vision. We have to see the big picture. Now, for me, when I talk big picture, of course, I'm talking Great Commission. What does it mean to us as a church to finish the Great Commission? We didn't set that aside. We didn't go to an off-ramp. We just kept dealing with it, and yet now COVID-19 has become a part of how we have to deal with things. Another, for instance, this last weekend was Go Finish Day. Go 2020 Day, an interdenominational effort of soul winning. I'm getting reports, Fred, of thousands that came to know Jesus over the weekend. How do you do that when you can't knock on somebody's door and say, do you know Jesus? Well, we found ways. And as a result, thousands have come to know the Lord. So those are a few tactical things, but keep the big picture in mind. Now, let me just mention this last one. Paul and I are doing this for a few days this week. To every leader watching right now, it is not wrong to hit the pause button.
Yes.
Fred, this has been grueling. These bags you see under my eyes, I've earned them. I got them honestly. This has been a grueling thing. It's been grueling for our pastors, our laity, everybody, parents. At some point in time, you've got to hit pause. If it's only an hour, if it's only a day, you've got to take a little bit of time and just sit back, breathe deep, pull some sleep if you can, binge watch a few Netflix movies or whatever, and just allow your mind to go somewhere else. Keep it true, keep it pure, but let it go somewhere else. And it's important to do that, because when this is over, we've still got ministry to do. So, Fred, I hope I haven't taken too much time, but I'm open for dialogue. Anything you want to tackle, let's go.
No, that's fabulous, Dr. Hill. Again, thank you so much. No, this last point of taking time for yourself, taking time to pause, I just finished doing the training in LeaderLabs 2.0 with our international offices, which you and the executive committee endorsed. And our last lab was entitled Selah. And it's the Old Testament psalm, of course, that I believe this COVID-19 experience has caused us all to slow down. One Japanese theologian said, God moves at 3 miles an hour at the speed of just walking. And I think sometimes we were thinking we were walking with God, but we were way ahead of Him.
Yeah.
And so I think this COVID-19 experience has reminded us of what Jesus did so often, and that was get alone and take time to just pause and let the brain and the heart catch up with what's going on.
Yeah, that is so important, Fred. And rest, there's a reason for the Sabbath. There's a reason pastors, where they can, and if they think they can't, they need to find a way to enjoy a sabbatical. That doesn't mean you have to take 3 months at a time, but if you do, great. But if it's a week at a time,
right.
But there's a reason God rested on the seventh day.
Yes.
And He's our example. He's our model. Fred, just give me a moment for a little self-reflection and perspective here. You know, I don't know that any of us are able to select what we're known for in history. I told Paula just a couple of days ago, I really wasn't looking for COVID-19 to be tied to Tim Hill's work in the history of the Church of God. I was hoping that my history would be connected to some other more exciting things. But be that as it may, when the history books are written for me, for you, for all of us, I hope that it's said of us that we were faithful, that we followed the leading of the Lord. We were not reactionary, but we were responsive. Now let me preach just a little bit. One of my favorite things to preach about, of all things, is the man who carried the cross for Jesus, Simon of Cyrene. When I preach about him, I call that sermon Lessons from the Unexpected Cross. Lesson number 1, Jesus carried it first. The Bible tells us, there hath no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. But with every temptation, God will provide a way of escape. That reminds me that He's already weighed our load. He's already understood the burden that we carry. Jesus carried that cross before Simon did. Number 2, Jesus and Simon carried it together. They were in tandem with one another. They practiced teamwork, at least for a while. Yes. Jesus and Simon carrying that cross. Number 3, the third lesson was, Simon, whether he knew it or not, had been geographically prepared, genetically prepared, and prepared in every other way to carry that cross. I've asked myself before when studying that story, why Simon? He was in the crowd. Why didn't they pick somebody else? Because at a glance, they looked at him and they knew this man has the muscular build. He has the skin tone. He's been out in the sun. He can handle this kind of a problem. Let's get him to carry this burden. That says to me that all of his life, whether he realized it or not, he had been prepared for that moment. I want to say to somebody watching right now, you've been prepared for this moment. There's another lesson. The other lesson is the Bible tells us in that story that people followed him. People followed him. His sons were there. If you'll read Bible history, his sons were Alexander and Rufus, who became known later in church history. They were impacted by the behavior of their father. He didn't crash in a crisis. He just picked up his cross and modeled good behavior, and it impacted his son's life for the future. People are watching me, Fred. They're watching you. Right. And they're watching all of those who are part of this. I want to model good behavior in a crisis. Here's the last lesson, and I'll leave you with this one. As sure as there was a place of picking it up, there was a place of laying it down. He picked it up when Jesus couldn't carry it any longer on that Via Dolorosa. But he only carried it to Golgotha. Not 1 foot past it, not a yard past it, not 100 feet past it. There was a designated, destined place to lay this burden down. And so as sure as COVID-19 started, it will end, and the church of the Lord Jesus Christ will flourish, and we as leaders will win victoriously. So there you have it.
What an awesome, inspirational message for us today. Dr. Hill, I can't say enough about what you've had to share with us today. And it's going to take some time really to unpack this, to be honest with you. These are concepts that are coming out of experience. But as Dr. Hill has shared with us today, there are so many leadership principles that I want to spend another hour just unpacking that. But that will be for another time. Dr. Hill, thank you so much.
Thank you, Fred.
So what I want to say to you today is what I try to leave you with after every episode, and that is this. When you have a choice as to what to do, why don't you spend about 20 to 45 minutes investing in you? And it'll pay off. So stay tuned, stay with us. And again, to Dr. Tim Hill, our leader in crises. Dr. Hill, you're doing a great job. I'm delighted to be a part of the team.
Thank you, Fred. God bless you.
Everybody, thank you so much for being with us today.